Knives Out is a new whodunit murder mystery film. I don't know, murder is kind of a questionable word, but a murder mystery aesthetic, let's say that.
A whodunit.
Or dinner theater aesthetic. A whodunit. It was written, produced, and directed by Rian Johnson, whose last film, of course, was Star Wars The Last Jedi. He's best known for films like Brick, Brothers Bloom, and Looper as well. And this is a very modern version of the whodunit story. Like, take Murder in the Orient Express, take like a classic Agatha Christie novel on that setup, take Clue, right, from the late 80s. And this is sort of like I don't know what's like a really fair comparison, but it's like a more progressive take on all of that. Or like, it feels like a step forward for that genre in that way, where you feel like Rian Johnson is taking that idea, that genre, and doing something new, but also in tribute to what came before.
Yeah, I mean, it has kind of like a novelistic approach at times. Not in the sense like with a Wes Anderson movie where it's like it shows the chapters on screen or anything, but like kind of plays out like a book would at times, where it's like we get like one chapter events and then it's like this is the next section where we're kind of flipped on its head a little bit, and it's a pretty fast.
Well, yeah, so I want to say then, because one of the reasons we want to save this for the last two is because we want to talk about this film in a little bit more detail. We're going to do like a spoiler-free section of this. But this is one of those films where we will say certain things that I think are better left experienced fresh. So you haven't seen the film. I think this is one of those cases where we really have to extra emphasize the importance of giving it a shot before you listen to us rant about it. But we will try to provide something of a review if you're still on the fence about this, right? So with that said, we're gonna get into some of the details of the setup of this film then. And some of its structure. I don't want to give away too much of the structure because it is just so much fun figuring out what kind of movie this actually is, and not to give anything away, right? So the setup is that Christopher Plummer is the person who dies, right? Very beginning of the film, he dies, not a spoiler, obviously. He is the patriarch of this really well-to-do family that is built on his fortune. He was a famous book author, mystery author, so you have a little bit of that meta narrative going on.
Well, I'm trying to think, you know who he's like inspired by or anything? Like I'm trying to think of a like kind of real life comparison for the character.
I thought it was probably drawing from Murder, She Wrote a little bit.
I guess. I mean,
but,
I was thinking like an author though. Like, is there anybody from like real life that's like you can point in comparison to this? Like,
real life?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
It's not like a Stephen King or like
no.
And he's like more well renowned than like someone like a John Grisham or something. So it's kind of hard to.
Well, I don't know. John Grisham has a lot of. I don't know. To me, I think Ryan. That's not the important thing. I think Rian Johnson is just trying to. I'm diluting
the conversation. Sorry.
Well, diluting?
Sorry.
Or like
diverting. Yeah, it's late.
Diverting. Whatever. No, it's fine.
It's late.
Sorry. This is a huge cast. A lot of heavy hitters. This family is sort of left in the wake of a crisis with the Christopher Plummer's character. He has passed on, and it looks like it's a suicide, but there's still like an investigation going on because there's some mystery behind the circumstances behind his death.
Some foul play.
Perhaps. We don't know. We really don't know.
Potentially.
So, Lakeith Stanfield is one of the head detectives in charge of this case. He's interviewing all of these different family members, and it is really fun too how the film sort of reveals who they are in relation to each other. We're introduced to Jamie Lee Curtis and Don Johnson, Michael Shannon, Toni Collette, Catherine Langford, Jaden Martell, plenty of others, and then eventually Chris Evans and Ana de Armas, who was the nurse to Christopher Plummer, who as soon as this film started to get going, I was like, she's the main character of this film. And that ended up being true. That ended up being the case where she really is the central character in what is otherwise like a very well-rounded ensemble. But then the other character to sort of like interrupt the proceedings here is Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig plays a very, I don't know if flamboyant's the right word, but definitely a dynamic and bombastic detective, private investigator character. He's sort of like a master at his craft, right?
I was gonna say, I mean, definitely the Hercules. How you is it Hercules?
Hercule Poirot. Yeah. He fills that role. He kind of is adding his own thing to it, where he has like a sort of like a Louisiana like aristocratic Southern accent.
Oh yeah, I described it as Frank Underwood playing Lieutenant Columbo by way of Foghorn Leghorn.
Yes, there it is. He is Detective Benoit Blanc, one of the best names of a character this year. And there are a lot of interesting names in this. Like Chris Evans literally plays a character named Ransom. It's a little over the top.
But at the same time, I kind of excuse it because given that it's like an author of great renown in a mystery novel, I kind of like that he also extended his kids to have kind of weird random names like that as well. I thought that was fun. Like he like turned his life into like a clue board.
Not all of them.
Yeah, no.
Well, the weird thing, he doesn't name that character because he's his grandson, right?
But just like the legacy,
his daughter,
his legacy is.
Well, his daughter's named Linda.
Right.
His son is named Walter. I don't remember any of the other names being that out of place. Right?
Okay, fair enough.
His name is Harlan.
Sure.
I don't know. Will.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
I don't know if this holds water.
All right, I will accept when I'm wrong.
Sorry. Well, and we should also say Ransom is his middle name.
Right.
And I'm just so curious. Maybe he did name his grandson. I don't know. Maybe Linda was a big fan of one of his books. But regardless, it seems like there's something more to his death. And in order to figure out what is going on and why he's even there in the first place, Daniel Craig's character, Detective Blanc, enlists the nurse of Christopher Plummer's character, Harlan Thrombey, Marta, played by Ana de Armas, to aid him in the investigation. And I think it's pretty clear that there are some secrets of her own that might inform her role and everything going on in this. This is a fantastic movie. I think this is one of those movies that you just love to see it. You love to see movies that are just firing on all cylinders. You know, it's not pretentious. It's not trying to be anything more than it is. And I thought this was just thoroughly satisfying entertainment. I know a lot of people who don't go to the movies a lot have been checking this one out sight unseen, just based on like the marketing and word of mouth, and fully loving it. I just think it's a genuine crowd pleaser of a movie, best sipped warm in the theater without any other information. So if that's all I need to say about it, I just think this is a really good film. I think, yeah, it's a B+ for me. I'm going to just put it out there. Just a really entertaining piece of work. What was your take on Knives Out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I agree with basically everything you said. Maybe the only thing I might push back on is that I think it's a little more political than you might be suggesting there. Like, I mean, like the themes of the film are not very subtle in that regard.
It's very political, but I think people are still going to engage with it.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I don't think it's so political that it's going to put people off. I think that it's political enough that it'll make you think about certain things, that it'll probably make some people uncomfortable and other people more or less uncomfortable. But I don't think it's I don't think it should or needs to ruin. I don't think it's ruined by.
No, it won't ruin the movie. I don't think. I mean, hopefully not. But I mean, I'm just letting people. I mean, I'm just making sure it's not like it's like, you know, like a completely lighthearted event. Like, it definitely has stuff on its mind. It has political ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I never said it was lighthearted.
Okay, fair enough.
I just think that I'm just hearing that a lot of people are going and seeing it and they're appreciating it for its mainstream appeal. And that's great because you're right. It also has some thoughtful things to say. There are ideas here. And I just think that it has like a really great ending. Like, it's one of those movies where the end is actually really good.
Yep.
My flaw with this is that I saw too much of it coming. Like, I found a little bit too predictable, like certain aspects of the mystery. But there was enough in it that was revelatory and different and unique that I give it mostly a pass on all that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I mean, for me, Rian Johnson's a filmmaker who I think with each consecutive film leading up to this, I mean, I think he's only gotten better. Like, I mean, I know some people really love Brick. I thought Brick was fine, maybe a little too cutesy for me, but I appreciate it as like a fun little genre exercise. Enjoyed Brothers Bloom. You know, Looper I liked quite a bit, but I mean, I think for me, yeah, it was like Last Jedi. I mean, much to the protest of some people online, I thought that was him really coming into his own. I guess well before that it was the Ozymandias episode of Breaking Bad, but I mean, for me, like from a cinematic standpoint, Last Jedi was like, here is like a filmmaker who, even in the studio system in this huge you know, IP of IPs, is able to make this very personal you know, filmmaker driven film with a lot of heavy themes and, you know, stuff we can really grapple with. And it's just like, clearly this guy is a filmmaker with so much to say and so much style to give. And I think this is a really great exercise in genre playing for him, while also staying true to what we expect from a traditional Rian Johnson film, such as a traditional Rian Johnson film might be. And yeah, I definitely echo what you said. I think it's really fun. I don't know if it's really stuck with me beyond the theatrical experience as much as I expected to. Like, I agree with you that, like, as a crowd pleasing, very smart, very engaging, twisty little film, I had a lot of fun with it, especially as it kind of unraveled in ways I wasn't anticipating. But it's not one I've really like thought that much about after it was done. I was just like, remember thinking like, that's a really solid, highly entertaining movie that I got what I wanted from this exactly. And yet, like, I don't know if it'll be in my top 10 for that reason, just because like it hasn't really like left any like deep impact for me. I just think it was really solid and held together well. But I'll maybe if we talk about more of the spoilery aspects, I might turn around and find myself appreciating it even more. But yeah, I think B+ is really on the mark for this. That's basically where I'm right now.
I have to agree. I don't think I'm going to be able to find a place for this in my top 10, but it's sad because I do find so much of it really refreshing. And again, you just love to see a film this original and not based on anything.
Right.
I mean, it's obviously based on things.
Right.
It's based on things that have come before, but just not in a source material or slavish to source material aspect where it really is trying to do its own thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it just accomplishes its mission statement. I think its mission statement is to be pure entertainment, and that's what it is. Mm-hmm. I have to agree. It didn't have just a very lasting effect on me either. It wasn't my favorite experience at the theater this year. It wasn't my favorite story. These aren't my favorite characters. But I think it all just comes together so well that I just really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Like I'm just really glad this exists.
Right.
And that it's so easy to recommend. Like, it's so easy to tell people like, oh, this is one of those movies you'll watch and like you'll get something out of it. Like, you'll actually have a really good time in the theater. Mm-hmm. And it's less risky. And that's probably why like some of it does sort of stop short of like true greatness for me, because it's not even really trying for that, really. I'm curious because some people they have their knives out for this film and they're ready to call it like an absolute masterpiece, you know, one of the best films ever, stuff like that. And, you know, I understand the enthusiasm because that's how it feels to just have that experience and to sort of like be surprised by something. I'm a little worried though that the success of this film is going to mean that we're getting a new Knives Out, where instead of these characters, Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc gets to be Poirot in another mystery film, and it's not going to be directed by Rian Johnson. That's probably for sure, and it's going to lose its appeal, right? Yes, Kenneth Branagh is going to get his second chance with a murder mystery.
Well, he's making another one with like a sequel to Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah,
right
that's
now,
true. That's true.
with Armie Hammer and stuff.
And I'm slightly interested in that, but this to me seems like a fresher property for sure. Mm-hmm. Like the modern twists on it, it being in modern day is a big selling point, just because it doesn't have all that fluff. It's able to be for our time in a way that a lot of whodunits aren't, because that's the thing. The best case scenario for this is that the genre is going to be revitalized, hopefully, in a way that we didn't get with Murder on the Orient Express. You and I talked about the film a couple years ago now, and that was not a film that really had an impact on either of us.
I liked it. I mean, I remember enjoying it, but yeah, but
it didn't have an impact. Like it definitely didn't affect the drama. But
I enjoyed
genre.
it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I fell asleep. But Knives Out, I did not fall asleep. But I feel like Knives Out is the kind of film that is going to inspire a little bit.
Sure.
Like, I think it actually is going to inspire people to make their own mysteries now. And possibly even far into the future, I think people will cite Knives Out as like, I was inspired to do this whodunit because I love Knives Out so much, right? Because it's one of the rare modern films that does it so well. I think they'll look at this, Clue, and a bunch of Agatha Christie work. So I'm a fan. I think this is I'm glad it's being successful. Like, it's that, you know, winter season surprise hit, and that's just wonderful to see.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, especially because this is the type of film like we critics and us in particular, I think we really want to champion like films like, like why don't we get more movies like this where it's like original non-IP driven films that are smart, filmmaker driven and stuff like that. And we got one. Usually what happens in scenarios like this is that they like tank and they become called classics. And this time it's actually, finding its audience and becoming a, at least decent success. So it's very heartwarming all around. So I'm glad personally to see it succeed as well.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think this is finding its audience a little bit easier? Do you think it's the timing? Do you think it's the cast? Do you think it's Rian Johnson?
I think it was smart to put this one around Thanksgiving. It's like a kind of family-based movie, and it's PG-13, so it's like, families can feel driven to want to see it. And kind of
it's edgier than Frozen 2 for sure.
Sure. But no, I mean there's like an old fashioned appeal to this. Like you said, like you don't really get a lot of whodunits, especially like original ones that aren't, based on some sort of book, but it doesn't feel like, you're seeing like your dad's like book collection turned into a movie. It's like a fairly modern film from an up and coming filmmaker with a really, solid cast of people. And I mean, I wasn't crazy about the promotions and the trailers for this, but it does have a kind of spunky, high energy thing that I could see appealing to people. And I think just this combination of factors worked in its favor. So, it's nice to see.
All right. Well, that is a B+ for me, B+ for you. And at this point, honestly, I don't have really any spoilers to get into. But
okay.
Which is surprising. I know, is that weird? I thought we would, but I feel like I've said everything that I want to say, but we're going to open it up for spoilers now because I wonder if you do. So if you don't want to be spoiled on Knives Out, you don't, none of that stuff, we'll see you next week at this point. From here on out, we're going to get into spoilers for Knives Out. Will, what do you have to say about this film in a more spoilery fashion?
Sure. I mean, I really didn't know that much about the film other than just like seeing the trailer, like the original trailer a lot in theaters, like it would always play before the movie. So, I mean, I personally wasn't anticipating it to be like the mystery aspect of it being eliminated like way before I think the first half of the movie is done. And it becomes more of a character piece where it's just like, we know who quote unquote killed this character. And it just like, we know why it happened or how it happened. It's just like kind of
like there's a secondary mystery,
right.
Or there's a few secondary mysteries that have to be resolved, right. But it is unique in how it's like, okay, the core of this movie, especially in the second act, isn't to find out who done it, but to root for the person to not get caught.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's just such a brilliant, it worked really well on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like one of the few times where it's like for a good chunk of the movie, you're just like, I hope the detective doesn't solve the case. And it's just fascinating in that respect. And then, like by the end of the movie or like by the third act, at least you're just like, oh, no, then you're turned around and you're like, oh yeah. So you do want to figure it out once you figure out that like she is kind of caught in this situation that is like, not really trying to get her. Well, I guess it is trying to get her, but it's not to frame her, but necessarily, but I don't know what I'm saying. It's late, but yeah, it's just a very twisty, but not like in a way that feels like forced twisty. It more like it feels way more organic than these type of films normally do as far as the plotting, and it's just very fun and exhilarating to see.
I agree. When I was watching this movie, I as soon as the toxicology report stuff came into it, I figured it out. And there were certain moments, but it was one of those things where you feel rewarded when you figure stuff out in this movie. Like there's a whole thing with like the dogs barking. And when that happened, like I just remember like the person I was with, we both were like, oh my gosh, that means that, you know what I mean? Like you feel smart for predicting what happens. I had the opposite experience with Last Christmas where I felt smarter than the film.
Well, I think the thing about this movie that I appreciate is that I wasn't really trying to find out the twists. Such as it would be, because like once they eliminated the like whodunit aspect of it, I was just like, okay, I'm just very curious to see where it's gonna go next. Like, is it gonna like go in a way I anticipate it to? Is it gonna go a completely different direction? Like, I was just more entertained with this, like the aspect of like, you've thrown out what I expected this film to be, but you're still enthralling me. Actually, I'm more with the movie now that's different than what I anticipated, weirdly enough. So that's, I think, really credit to Rian Johnson, that like you can like basically, turn a movie completely on its heel, give people something they weren't expecting at all, but still keep them highly entertained and engaged throughout without making them feel like they were cheated out of their viewing experiences.
I just think it's also a testament to how you can really watch this film again, and now that you know where it's going to go, you can just go through it again and like feel, you can sort of catch things that you might have missed before, and it's also rewarding on the second time around, I suspect. So that's another thing to sort of credit it with.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. What were you gonna say though?
Oh, like if you'll still enjoy it like the second time?
Well, I just don't know what it's gonna be like. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally, I think that I'll have a great time because like now that you have the full picture, you can go back and catch what you missed and all that. I think that this movie does work too in other aspects. Like I just think that it's a compelling family drama about this group of misfits, unlikable misfits for the most part, who are being like exiled by their patriarch for reasons that make sense. Like I love how usually in this scenario, like everyone usually does have a motive for murdering, but in this case they all suck. And you tend to like look at that and be like, oh well, that it's because the patriarch is a bad person, but in this case he's like one of the only good people in the story. And even though I thought it was a little bit forced of like how all that stuff goes down with like how the will gets transferred over and all of that, I do think it serves really well the plot, because when you watch this family turn on Marta, it is such a revealing and I thought affecting moment where you just really, that's where a lot of the social commentary comes in for sure. Like, because of course, like some of the characters who have like certain political considerations are going to instantly become very selfish, as we would expect, right? But then to show how that also happens with people who tend to be more self-righteous about their views on things, and they tend, because they look at this woman as like, oh, she's part of the family and she's one of us, but no, not really. Like that there is a clear line there. This movie actually reminded me of Parasite in that way, and the way that family treats the other family, where it's like there's a line that they better not cross the line, and when they cross the line, this film kind of explores another side of that. Another interesting double feature, I bet, is to pair Knives Out with Parasite. I bet that would be fascinating.
Definitely, yeah, I bet so. No, I agree with you. Yeah, that was actually something I was going to bring up as well in our spoiler section, is that I really appreciate that this movie didn't like, because a lot of these movies, like, with the rich family, there was going to always be like one that's like decent. And I guess you can kind of say that's the case with Christopher Plummer. But like, I like for the most part of the living people, their main characters, like none of them are really good people. Like at best, like, Catherine Langford, I guess, is like the closest to good. But even she is.
But she's not.
But she's not. Yeah.
Ultimately,
she still has fairly selfish intentions, and she's kind of like putting on a face for the once push comes to shove. So yeah, I appreciate that aspect a lot, and yeah, I mean that's definitely I think where the kind of Parasite aspects or comparisons come in. Where like that movie, it's like you kind of expect one of them to be like smarter than they let on, like the dad or like maybe even the mom in that case. But it's just like no, they're all just like dumb and aloof.
Yeah. But one last note for me is a lot of these performances were good. It's always great seeing Chris Evans kind of do something different, sort of shed his Captain America image. Ana de Armas, love her so much. I just I was a little concerned with how things have been going with things like Knock Knock and whatever, but I think this and Blade Runner 2049 have more than solidified that she is a true talent, and I think that she's this is a film that's really going to push her forward as an actress, because she's one of the least recognizable in the mainstream compared to the others. But I think this movie hopefully will change that. I didn't think everybody was like a true standout. Like Michael Shannon, he's in this and I think he's fine. It didn't really stand out to me in any meaningful way. Well, I didn't think he had a lot to do. He has his moments, but and I would say like Don Johnson by comparison had some really funny there's good scenes and good moments.
I don't know. I think Michael Shannon has the best line in the whole movie. I will not eat one iota.
Okay, yeah, that is a good line. That is a good line. Yeah. Toni Collette, oh my gosh, she was insufferable, but not in a bad way.
Oh, see, Toni Collette's actually
she serves a great purpose, I think, in this.
Actually, that was the one performance here I wasn't really digging. Like, it's very obviously like a Gwyneth Paltrow stand-in kind of thing, and it was like, I don't know. I mean, I warmed up to it more as it went on, but like she just felt like way broader than everyone else in the movie. Like, and I think Toni Collette's an amazing actress, so I have nothing against her personally, but I saw her
for sure.
Her performance just felt kind of like a little too over the top compared to everyone else.
Sure.
I was kind of disappointed that like we didn't get more of Jamie Lee Curtis. Like
I was about to say that it feels like we're missing some scenes with her and the relationship between her and her father. We don't get enough of like what's going on there. to the point where I actually suspected, I was like, is she sort of the murderer here?
Right.
Because like, is the film, and I was worried that would be the case because like, are they sort of setting her up as like such a red herring because she's like the only one who doesn't have as clear a motive? And it didn't make sense to me why she was cut off from everything. Like what I wish this movie had done a little bit more of is sort of set up that she wants to be cut off. Like she doesn't want to rely
Right.
on her father. She wants to be self-made. And so it would make more sense in that way that she would be cut off because she doesn't need him. But the movie just never gets to that. I feel it does feel like it's something that was edited out.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Or like she wants to be self-made, but when push comes to shove and the prospect of not having money. I mean, for her, it's just more something with the house, I guess. Like maybe she was like overburdening. Right. That was like her main concern with it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love the look they gave her in this movie. I think that was fantastic. But
yeah, it's another good reason to rewatch this film. Probably is to re-examine her story, her role in this, because it probably makes more sense the second time around.
Yeah,
with a clearer head. I do also want to bring up like the kids in this kind of fall to the background. Like we don't get a lot of them, especially Jaden Martell. Who is one of the other grandsons, and he's like the alt-right troll, and he just never quite came into this movie as anything other than like a human prop. You know, doesn't have a lot of lines, doesn't really do much. Catherine Langford at least has like moments where her dialogue and her interaction with Marta drives the plot forward in a way. But there was nothing with Jaden Martell that I thought held much of interest to me. And then I was slightly disappointed by sort of a same thing with Lakeith Stanfield. He sort of plays a straight man in this. Yeah. He doesn't really get a moment. Like, I don't know. It felt like there was something missing with him as well, where it just felt a little underwritten to me or undercooked for one of the best performers in the movie. So
maybe
minor criticisms.
Maybe not underwritten per se, but just like maybe overcast. Like, maybe you just they just hired too talented an actor for a role that wasn't really super consequential in the scheme of things. But maybe that's like a red herring in itself. Like it seems like he's going to play a bigger role and he doesn't. So I don't know. I don't know
either. But with that, I'm done talking about Knives Out. I like this film a lot, as you did. Any final thoughts on the movie before we finish this out?
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, like, part of me kind of wants it to have more stuff with the family just because they kind of get pushed aside a lot in the second half outside of Chris Evans and to an extent Christopher Plummer. But I mean, I also kind of appreciate that like the things I like so much about the movie are the things I weren't anticipating. So I don't know. It's kind of like part of me wants it to be more what I expected, and also part of me recognizes that I think what makes it truly really good is that it pushes those expectations away. So ultimately, I'm pretty satisfied with what we got.
All right, that is Knives Out. It is out in theaters right now.